What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is iRate Reviews, the weekly review show where I go over a comic book, its art, its story, give you my impressions, and let you know whether it's something you should check out or not. So make sure you subscribe to get more of these every week. This story is going to be about Batman The Dawnbreaker #1. So Batman The Dawnbreaker #1 is a continuing DC Dark Knight's Metal tie-in, which is really the origin stories of all these different Dark Knight characters. And what they show is they show a Batman in desperation, reaching out and taking the powers of his fellow Justice League members in order to support his dying world, or at least that's what most of these are. However, the Dawnbreaker takes everything in a little bit different direction, so let's just jump right into the story. What we start off with is a Batman who isn't really a Batman. He's really geared up more like a Green Lantern, and what he starts to do is recount his story and how he kind of came to gain this power. And what we see is that the night of Bruce Wayne's parents' murder, he is sitting there in the alley, and then ultimately a Green Lantern ring comes out of the sky and finds him on his knees weeping over his parents. It tells him that he has the ability to exercise great will and slowly moves its way onto his finger to find that the boy immediately takes to this power and seeks out the killer of his parents, Joe Chill. And what he does is when he gets there, he's just like, kill the man that killed my parents, and the ring's like, I've got these limitations, and he just overpowers it. His will goes from 100% to 118% to 181% until it fractures the protections on the ring and allows the darkness and the lethal force to be authorized as he blows away Joe Chill in this alleyway. So as a young child, I mean, we're talking like early teens, like late, really early childhood, he gains the power of one of the most ultimate weapons inside the DC universe as far as the Green Lantern Corps and basically the molding of the light spectrum in his hands. And first they called him a hero, but that moniker didn't really last very long because he liked to exercise lethal force. People that didn't treat him with respect or didn't treat him properly, he found a way to eliminate them, and that could be that's something that happened to Mr. Bullock. So Harvey didn't really last very long, and when Jim Gordon comes to question him about a certain missing character, he recounts the story of the Penguin. He goes into the Penguin's hideout, initiates a blackout, which allows not only the darkness within him to snuff out the light of the Green Lantern, but to use the powers associated with that to create this nightmare kind of scenario, ultimately grabbing the Penguin, flying him into space, and allowing like comets or like meteorites to just smoke him and leave him asunder inside space. And when Jim Gordon comes down to question him, after he recounts this story, he just looks at him, forces his ring in his direction, and blows Jim Gordon away. At that point in time, he feels this emptiness, this sadness, this darkness, this void deep inside of him. He steps into the Lantern power battery and comes out Batman the Dawnbreaker. And at that point in time, we see that the planet around him starts to kind of break apart because this is the dark multiverse and everything's fated to really destroy itself inside the scenario. And he's on like some sort of space trash, I guess, or universal space trash, when the Batman Who Laughs finds him. With an offer of power and resurrected parents, he takes off into the Earth Zero, subservient to Barbatos, or whatever you're really going to call him, and then heads to Coast City, where he runs straight into Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, which is an interesting part of the story, but we're not going to talk about that too much. And, he starts to go into conflict with him. Hal's ring malfunctions, and ultimately Dr. Fate comes in to steal him in the heat of the moment and save him so that way he could confront the Dawnbreaker later on. But that's where the story really ends. It ends in darkness and the Dawnbreaker creating a dark world out of Coast City. And this is where I run into my positives and my negatives. Because first of all, everything that's led up to this, the Red Death's one-shot, the Murder Machine one-shot, and all the other one-shots that I can see in the future, they've all had really good stories that are surrounding Batman as a character. And this one kind of breaks that tradition because it is a story surrounding Bruce Wayne as a young child. So when Sam Humphries wrote this story, I can see how he envisioned this. In this heat of the moment scenario, it's the easiest way for Bruce Wayne's young character to take the darkness into him and become corrupted as a part of that. However, he never really became Batman. So his transition to Batman the Dawnbreaker doesn't make nearly as much sense to me. So it's kind of weird in that respect. I mean, this is dark. This is brutal. We're talking about a child that takes his own willpower and just destroys human beings, has no regard for any kind of life, seeks justice that his parents weren't afforded. It's a really dark, twisted turn for the character. I mean, the scripting is all right, but, you know, it's just like, okay, if we're going to go off the deep end of this particular character, this is a deep dive into the dark parts of the dark universe. So I understand that. It's just that it's weird to see, you know, Bruce Wayne's Green Lantern become a Batman when he never really had any ties to the Batman kind of mythos or anything that really went along with that. So on the one bad day, the worst day of Bruce Wayne's life, absolutely I could see him turning to the dark side and becoming a villain of his own story. But it just feels weird. You know, I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad, but it's just weird, especially when in comparison to the two predecessors that we've had before this. It just feels like the story originates in a different way and it's trying to tell, you know, give a different meaning to things. As far as Ethan Van Sciver's art, I have a hard time saying that name. I'd say that it's very much in line with what he's done with Green Lantern in the past. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm particularly a fan of it, but I find that it's, you know, very well rendered in this scenario. It's definitely a good book, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the strongest out of the two. I think that the kinetic and frenetic, the style of the Red Death really lent itself to the entire story, and I think Joshua Williamson's script was very strong, and you can feel the desperation in Batman, and then you can feel the love and protection when you're talking about Alfred as he became an AI in Frank Thierry's story for the Murder Machine, and this one just felt like a boy giving in to his childhood despair at the loss of his parents. And I don't know if that's just a downer, but that's really what I felt. So that's my review of Batman The Dawnbreaker #1. Overall, I mean, I'm a completionist, so I'm going to get all these together. I think that it's definitely not necessarily the strongest of the books so far, and I'm sure time will tell whether it kind of pans out in the overall pantheon of the 7. But it's definitely a must-read if you want to stick in with the DC Dark Knight's metal tie-ins. So it's definitely one that I recommend you pick up just for that reason. But that's my idea on it. Those are my thoughts, but I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below so we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything having to do with the world of comics.